Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about the floor press. This is an exercise that I use a lot for clients. It's an exercise I use a fair amount myself in phases. Sometimes I go a long time without doing it. Sometimes I do it a lot. But it is one of the really good tools that we have in our toolbox. And for a lot of people, they'll say, well, what is this for? It reduces the range of motion a little on the bench. And you'll notice with most of my lifters, it's not a massive range of motion reduction. It's not like they're half reps, unless you're a really skinny person with no back, right? But if you have any back development, it actually is way less than a half rep, and in many cases, we can touch our chest on it. So it's not about reducing the range of motion. All right, one of the big points to this, actually I'd say the two biggest points are saving your shoulders, right? Saving your shoulders and removing leg drive. And the reason I make the point about leg drive, people would say stuff like, well, what do you mean? Couldn't you just not leg drive? The answer to that is no. This is the reason you'll see a lot of people put their feet up on a bench who are fairly skilled benchers. I am not a fan of that. I actually think that is a high risk injury for no benefit when they could just floor press. And I'm not saying it doesn't do the intended job. It does. It removes the leg drive from the movement, makes the movement stricter. However, the downside is it's a high risk of tearing a pec. And I have coaches who love it, program it a lot, do it all the time. And I've seen some of them even admit, yeah, as I do it, I start to realize, if things go a little squirrely on it, I'm strained pecs easy. It's like, yeah, it's a pec tear waiting to happen. Because you can get unstable real easy on one side, and then things get stressed, and if you fail, it could go badly. And there's no reason to do it. We can get the same thing from a floor press, particularly if you put your legs straight. So what do we mean by you have to do that? Well, once you learn how to bench press, you can't turn your leg drive off. In other words, if you've learned how to bench and you're used to and you're just ingrained to set up tightly, what do you think happens when you bench? You leg drive automatically, right? Anyone who gets really tight when they bench press, anyone who learns to get really, really, really tight when you bench press and set up tight, it becomes second nature to get tight. So what do you think happens? Well, I'll tell you what happens. You have leg drive automatically, and you can't really turn it off. It's a product of getting tight. When you learn to dig in on the bench, you're going to have some leg drive no matter what you do to try to stop it, other than get loose again. Well, then you're practicing getting loose on the bench. That's not good. It's easier to just do a different exercise that works the same muscles. Some people put their feet up. I like the floor press because, again, if you watch me here, like when I do this heavier single at 315, there's no leg drive. Come to a stop, I have to use my pecs to drive it off the bottom. Also, notice you can't use technique. You cannot use technique. You can't use your lats to pop it up. You can't use the leg drive. You can't use any of that stuff. It is just brute strength to break it off the floor. Okay, this lets us work the pecs a little differently. And here's why it matters. If you start to stick a little bit just off the chest, well, what do you think happens? Like if you stick 4 or 5 inches off the chest, and let's say on the floor press, you stop 2 inches from your chest, well, what happens? That means you have to learn to engage the pectorals extremely hard to do all the moving through your weak link. Okay, because we can't use leg drive, we can't use our lats. We have to use the pecs to get the weight started. Now, we could also make the case for it being a very strong tricep movement too, because of the partial nature. I don't know that I personally agree with that. But what I do agree with is that using the pecs out of the bottom. And we've got some EMG stuff on that would kind of indicate the same thing, and it makes sense. It's not saying we necessarily stretch the pecs better or always grow the pecs better with the floor press, but it does suggest a higher level of neurological activity due to that dead stop and the inability to use any technique. It's all chest out of the bottom. Okay, that's beneficial if we're doing that. So what are we getting in terms of then rep work? Well, it allows us to very heavily activate the pecs. is one of the few ways that we can really heavily activate the pecs, even for our rep work, without lengthening them all the way. Okay, now that's interesting because normally that lengthened position is where we gain hypertrophy. We're trimming a little bit of that out for a little higher neurological activity. All right, it's a good way to break up your bench training. If you've been benching and pecs are still limiting you a little bit, floor press is a good fix. And it's a good fix that has full technical carryover and bar path carryover to your bench press. It's a great chest builder, in my experience, particularly when people have inflamed shoulders or inflamed pec tendons, because that's one of the issues we do run into, or particularly when we're doing a lot of dumbbell work and we get into that lengthened position a lot. I find that sometimes my lifters start to get inflamed pec tendons from really heavy use of that lengthened position. All right, and when that happens, we need to find a way to continue to press, continue to use the chest when those areas are inflamed. And we can do that oftentimes with the floor press because it doesn't put that same stretch on the tendon. And that is something we've noticed on the research with a lot of chest movements. That last couple inches of stretch at the bottom tends to really stretch the tendons on the outside of the pectoral where it attaches into the armpit and into the shoulder. It tends to stretch that tendon a lot more right there. It's just something that's been noted in the research. And so if we remove that, if it starts to get inflamed, it can allow that inflammation to heal and allow us to continue to hammer the pecs. And I'm not saying this happens to everyone. It is just a solution for when it does happen. And it's something I rotate in for my lifters frequently if that occurs. And it's the same thing when we're dealing with a lot of shoulder issues. I've found that the floor press can allow people to continue to train their chest and bench press and have a lift that has full carryover to their bench when their shoulders are inflamed or they've suffered some sort of shoulder injury. I'm not saying you can do it every time, but the most extreme case I had was I had a lifter who had 2 impingements in his shoulder related directly to his career. And again, it was military related. They had damaged both of his shoulders and he couldn't bench even the empty barbell without pain. We managed to get him on a floor press at first with a football bar. And he was able to do that with normal weights for a while, built that up, went to a normal bar, and eventually, as he rehabbed his shoulders, he was able to bench press over 300 pounds again, okay, with multiple shoulder-related work issues, right, that were injuries. It allowed him to do that. So that's what the floor press can do for you in a lot of cases if you're dealing with that. And I'm not suggesting that uninjured people use the floor press exclusively. So keep that in mind. I'm not saying it's a replacement for the bench press or with a barbell or a dumbbell. I'm saying that it is a useful tool to help us work around these things when they occur. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys next time.